I started reviewing this story in my other video on Brexit, talking about what was taking place in France. France is burning the Yellow Jackets, which is essentially a protest movement against Macron. Started on a gas tax, of all things, and it's expanded into a broad front by various groups with various interests, ranging from the left to the right to mom and dads and kids who are against the economic policies of Macron, again, lit by this fuel tax. But that is not the only reason they're doing this. Take a look at this. This is RT. RT, going into showing anything from RT on something like this, RT has a perspective. When the United States was, when Western powers were perfectly okay with the Ukraine going up in flames, if you remember, when the Ukraine broke apart, you had the Western countries that were cheering the violence, cheering the fact that this unelected government was taking hold, and cheering the toppling of the government that was in the Ukraine. They backed the unelected government that took hold in a coup. Now, there was a counter coup in order to carve out a part of that to Russian territory or Russian friendly territory, but there was a coup that the West backed, and it was perfectly okay with the level of violence that was taking place in the Ukraine. Not so much here. Now, RT makes that point through George Galloway. That's later in this particular interview, but George Galloway is absolutely right on this. Take a look at what's going on first, just so we have some context. There are going to be two stories from RT, but they're going to be short clips of each story. Let's go through the first one and then go through the second. This is fucking amazing.
As you can see, they're sounding their sirens here just on the Place de la Concorde as you go towards the National Assembly. The thing that they're unhappy about is a change here in France that was implemented 2 months ago, whereby hospitals now decide which ambulance service in France will collect patients. And the drivers are concerned that that could threaten their jobs in the future. Now, this is just the latest in a stream of protests that we've been seeing here in France, particularly over the last few weeks, with the very visible movement of the Gilets jaunes. They've been out for 3 weekends on the trot now, with protests descending into chaos here in Paris. And it looks like those protests are set to continue. Some have described the violence in Paris on Saturday for burnt buildings, burnt cars, graffiti and smashed shops and looting as some of the worst violence that France has seen since 1968.
All right. You can see some of the scenes. You can see some of the chaos that's taking place. I'm going to go further into that chaos. Here's another story, giving a little bit more context to what's taking place in Paris.
I'm just next to where you've actually shown those pictures from. There was to paint a picture of what the situation looks like here at the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, is you have a central nucleus of police in full riot gear, fully equipped. We're actually seeing tear gas flying over our heads right now. I'm going to be moving out of the way as I'm talking to you. That's really not safe for me to be stood there doing that. It's also not, to just explain what was happening, the police that you can see located just over there, which was exactly 180 degrees from where I was facing, they just fired several rounds dangerously close over my head right then. That's something I've certainly never seen by any riot to. They say they aren't going anywhere, and they told me exactly why. They've come here this Saturday to say no to the rise in fuel prices, but also to say no to President Emmanuel Macron.
Humanity should be put first, not money. It's not impossible. You know, you come to these protests because you don't have enough money to survive till the end of the month. Then you find out you are more privileged than the others there because you earn more than €1,000 a month.
Think about what he's saying. Like, this is not just fuel costs. This goes into these guys being able to live. And it goes into the broader framework of what Macron is doing in that office. This is taking place on the left. This is taking place on the right. This is taking place on the middle. You have 2/3, I think it was like 70% of the French population supporting these guys. This is even after the violence. Look, the overwhelming majority of France hates the violence. It doesn't necessarily like the violence. They do back the Yellow Jackets, especially if it's part of a peaceful protest. Let's keep going, because I want him to discuss what they want. But I love that. Humanity should be put first. Humanity over profits. People over profits. Fucking A. No disagreement with me there. Protest on. Let's keep going.
We already working on minimal tariffs for social insurance, and I don't understand what will be next. I'd like to be sure we can do the best we can to provide good conditions for patients. I don't know for sure who's to blame for escalating the situation, the police or the yellow vests. But now I'm fully on the side of protesters, as long as they're peaceful.
Macron is not credible. He wasn't credible even at the time of the election. About 80% of the population stand by the Yellow Vest movement. That indicates that France faces a huge number of issues. We'll do everything to make Emmanuel Macron resign.
We are being taxed from all sides. We work, we study, we raise our children, and we are overtaxed. So stop moving the problem aside.
The Russian Revolution started over bread and expanded into other stuff. I'm fascinated by what is taking place here. Let's go into the stories themselves. I'll try to make these relatively fast in my explanation. So, let's see. First, the pronunciation of what these guys are.
Gilets jaunes.
Gilets jaunes. My wife speaks French to some degree. I've taken Spanish class, but at the point where you don't use it, it kind of goes away. It translates to yellow vests. The reason they use the term yellow vest is because they're required to carry these in their cars. Like, if you're a French driver, you're required to carry a yellow vest in your car. So these guys put these yellow vests on as some of the protests. This started as a grassroots movement. I just read it. Grassroots citizens protest movement began in early November against a planned tax rise on diesel and petrol. Now, that tax rise was going to take gas to like $7 a gallon. If you're in America and you hear $7 a gallon, your head would explode. So you can understand why they're pissed off at this. If you're driving, I don't know if they have Uber there, but if you're driving a taxi, if you're driving an ambulance, if you're driving anything at all where you're taking a person from point A to point B, either you're going to have to raise the amount that you charge people, which means you're probably going to get less business, but it also means that you may go out of business. Like, I'll talk about this after. Let's go through the story first. The movement was named Gilets jaunes because protesters wear fluorescent yellow jackets. How has this escalated? The French Interior Minister said a total number of people demonstrating has dropped since its peak on November 17th, when about 285,000 people demonstrated across France. On December 1st, 2 weeks after the protest, the Interior Minister said that at 3 p.m., 75,000 people were on the streets. It is thought that about 100,000 in total demonstrated in France throughout the day. That is amazing. That is amazing. I love this. However, violence has escalated at weekly Paris protests held on Saturdays. While thousands demonstrated peacefully on December 1st, about 3,000 people fought running battles with the police, burned more than 100 cars, set fire to several buildings, smashed bank windows, shop fronts, and some of the most expensive streets on the capital. Meaning, when African Americans protest, and people would say, well, they're setting their own stuff on fire. And these guys, they're like, we're not going to set our own house on fire. We're setting your house on fire because we believe that the issue is the established order of things. I find this to be amazing. Authorities blame extreme right and extreme left professional rioters. I don't know what a professional rioter is, for infiltrating peaceful demonstrations. That seems to always happen. Let's keep going. The Paris prosecutor said a majority of more than 300 people in police custody after Paris violence was waged between 30 and 40 who had come to fight the police, claiming to be part of the Gilets jaunes movement. Let's do the image roll while we're going through it. Let's see. Protesters in other regions continue to stage roadblocks, and stage fuel depots have been blocked in Northwest. Some high school students have now joined the movement and barricaded schools. It's kind of my point. This goes beyond just the issue of fuel tax, and it goes into, you could say, the economic system itself how some have profited at the expense of others. And not just that. I've argued before, and I even make the argument now, that Brexit, or Donald Trump getting elected, or Bolsonaro getting elected, or the 5-star movement in Italy getting elected, all of those things are expressions of public outrage, public fury, legitimate, righteous anger waged at a system that they have woken up believing is treated them to some degree unfair. Some has magnificently benefited, if you're talking about a top 1%, while these guys are getting a tax that's going to hit them brutally. It's not just the fuel tax. The tax cuts that Macron is passing, the tax on workers that Macron is passing or trying to push through from the standpoint of policies. They've been protesting in France for the past year or so. This has just escalated. But let's keep going through the story. I don't want to get off on a tangent. Protesters have largely come from peripheral towns, cities, rural areas across France that include many women and single mothers. Most of the protesters have jobs, including secretaries, IT workers, factory workers, delivery workers, and care workers. All say they're low income, meaning they cannot make ends meet at the end of the month. These are just regular people. These are just regular people. The overwhelming majority of the people who are there to protest are just regular people protesting the system itself, using the lightning rod of the fuel tax. The movement is predominantly against a tax system perceived as unfair and unjust, but there are numerous grievances and differences of opinion. Most want to scrap the fuel tax, hold a review of the tax system, raise the minimum wage, and roll back Macron's tax cuts for the wealthy and his pro-business economic program. But some want Parliament dissolved and Macron to resign. That's where the new protests are going. Now, in response to this, the government itself, you can imagine, is not going to take any shit from the standpoint of they're not going to be behind violence. That's a red line for government that goes out of the political system, which means they don't. Government is the only party that claims to have a legitimate right to violence. Any other person or any other group that claims to have that legitimate right is going to run afoul of the government. Now, meaning, I suspect that you get more bang for your buck with a peaceful protest than you do with a violent protest. And the violence in this don't necessarily do you any favors. It does draw attention to you, but it draws attention to you in somewhat the wrong ways, and you may turn off the public, not to mention you get the police involved. And the police agrees with them. That's the amazing part. There are scenes where police take off their helmets because they're not going to go after them. As long as the protesters were peaceful, the police, to some degree, agreed. That's fascinating. Because they're also going to have to pay a fuel tax. What happened today in Paris has nothing to do with peaceful expression of legitimate anger. There is no reason that justifies security forces being attacked, businesses looted, public or private businesses or buildings set on fire, bystanders or journalists threatened, and the Arc de Triomphe defiled in this way, Macron said at the G20 summit in Buenos Aires. The perpetrators of this violence do not want change. Yes, they do want change. They want any improvement. Yes, they do want improvement. They want chaos. No, they want a better life. They betray the cause to which they claim to serve. To some degree, the people who are engaged in violence, yes, they are, and which they manipulate. They will be identified and held accountable for their actions before courts, he told reporters. The Interior Minister, Christopher Castaner, said on Twitter in the morning that around 200 peaceful protesters that gather at the, I'm going to screw this word up, Champs-Élysées, and it's not that way, that's not the correct pronunciation, but forgive me for this. While 1,500 disruptors had amassed outside of the security perimeter formed by police and were trying to break through. Our security forces are responding and pushing back to thugs. I love the way they call them thugs. By the afternoon, around 75,000 people across France were believed to have taken part in Saturday's protests. You can imagine that the overwhelming majority number of those people were not violent at all. But the only thing that you're seeing is the violence. I'm just saying, it draws attention in wrong ways. According to the Ministry of Interior, onlookers described scenes of chaos, not only in the center of Paris, but also in several other districts. They brought Paris to a halt. And some, you can say the more militant wings of the left and the right, set it on fire. Let's keep going. So, Macron said they'll halt the fuel tax. Or at the very least, they'll pause it. They use the pause. But I love the response. The Yellow Vests have vowed to continue the high profile after forcing French government in a U-turn. But it's not a U-turn. And let me explain what I mean. Other protesters were sparked by the plane riots and a fuel tax next month. Gilets jaunes movement has grown to encompass a wider anger and frustration against the political elite in Paris in general and the President Emmanuel Macron and the government in particular. They may be a body of disparate people, but they are aggregating around themselves, meaning they are forming somewhat of a nucleus in regards to their anger. On Tuesday, the Prime Minister, let's show you what I'm looking at. On Tuesday, the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, bowed to pressure on the streets and announced the increases were being suspended for 6 months. That's not a U-turn. A suspension is not a U-turn. Scrapping them would be a U-turn. This is a pause. That's the difference in those things. He just wants to bring the temperature down and then try to reintroduce them later on. He also announced an immediate freeze on gas and electricity prices, but warned further violence would not be tolerated. Macron had repeatedly vowed not to give in to the unrest, but has been forced to reconsider after some of the worst street violence in Paris in half of a century. Not to mention 2/3 of Paris, including those cops that were there beating those people, agrees with what these guys want. You have a problem, sir. You have a problem. But I love this. The measures were dismissed as insufficient by protesters and threatened to inflame an already volatile situation that resulted in cars and buildings being torched, iron railings being pulled down, and Tuileries Gardens and looting of luxury goods stores around, Champs-Élysées and Arc de Triomphe on Saturday. The Yellow Jackets have called for a further protest this Saturday. They're not stopping. They're calling for more. I'm fascinated by this. The movement, which has no central organization or leaders, has broadened its demands to include Macron's resignation and dissolution of French Parliament. Benjamin Kashi, a Gilets Jaunes spokesperson, said the French are not sparrows and do not want crumbs the government is giving them. Yes, I love that. They want the baguette. The movement demands include a redistribution of wealth, as well as rises in salaries, pensions, social security payments, and minimum wage. Fucking A. Kashi said that the dialogue between the French government and protesters did not have to be face to face. This is the 21st century, and dialogue can happen by social media and even without meeting. This started with ecological transition, but what the French wants is political transition, he said, adding that the protests should be pacifist. And I agree with him. They should be. They should be. The population agrees with that. The population, they have 66%, around 2/3, 70% of the population agrees with their demands, including those cops that are there hitting those people in the head. This is amazing. Now, here's real talk. I said this in the other video. I'm going to say this again. Those people who are pushing a Green New Deal and you're not dealing with the realities of individuals on the ground, you're going to lose. Emmanuel Macron may have put this through for the standpoint of a few texts to try to transition to ecological, new reality. But the fact of the matter is, he's not touched by that fuel tax. The people who are lesser income are hit by that fuel tax. When he's given those wealthy donors, or I don't know if they're donors in France, but when he's given his wealthy people of his class a tax cut, while simultaneously putting through austerity measures, or you could say measures that are going to attack workers and increase their living expenses, what are they to do? Now, let's take the example of West Virginia. I said this in the last video. In West Virginia, 25% of the population of West Virginia that are kids are poor. They're in poverty, outright poverty. If I'm not mistaken, around 19% of the population is poor or in poverty from the standpoint of what the government is saying is the poverty line. That poverty line is dramatically low, and you can be much above that line and still not have access to the things that you need and still be persistently vulnerable. West Virginia provided energy for the entirety of the country. How is there that much poverty in a country that has provided that much of a resource to the rest of the country? That money had to go somewhere. Obama gave 95% of the wealth to the top 1%. That is a magnificent number. But from the standpoint of a West Virginia standpoint, you would imagine something similar happened with the proceeds of the money going for West Virginia powering the country. If you are on the left and you are screaming about a Green New Deal, and you are not dealing with the economic realities of the people in West Virginia, you're going to lose. You're not going to get them. It's not that they're wrong or crazy. It's just that their immediate needs come first. The same thing applies in Paris. It's not so much that the people may be against the Green New Deal. What they would be against it if it adversely affects them. The things that they need in order to make ends meet to go from point A to point B. That is their immediate needs, and those immediate needs are going to come first before this kind of inferior world coming to an end stuff. I agree that there needs to be a Green New Deal. I agree that there needs to be a revolution in regards to our economic system from the standpoint of energy. We need a sustainable system, not this particular system that we have. Now, but from the standpoint of the left, pushing for the Green New Deal as a tip of the spear is going to lose. I'm sorry. Part of the Green Party's problem is that they're considered to be tree huggers. Tree huggers, when your kid needs to be fed, or when your kid is in poverty, or when you need to get access to medication that you can't necessarily afford, or when you need to make a choice between drugs and pills, and somebody's talking about this Green New Deal stuff, that sounds nice, but my kid needs to eat. I'm making the point that the individual needs of a person comes first. They're not wrong for that. They're not insane for that. Any person would do that. Nobody is going to say, I'm going to be more insecure in order to save the world. They're not going to say that at all. They're going to say, I need to make my needs met. And if I don't get my needs met, then I'm not going to be with you on this other stuff. In the example of West Virginia, it is not insane for a person in West Virginia to want to keep his job, even if that job is in coal production. If that person needs to feed his kid, feed his family, maintain his house, maintain his car, whatever the person does that he considers to be a life, hell, pay his Xbox subscription. As a regular person, he wants to be able to do those things. He's not wrong for wanting to do those things. The problem is the rest of the country looks at this and says, well, fuck, we need to stop doing coal and we need to get on a green new platform. Unless you deal with the individual needs of the person, wealth redistribution has to come first before you go into this idea of a Green New Deal. You can do the Green New Deal, but you can do the Green New Deal after people's individual needs are met. What you're seeing in Paris, where they are flipping out like this over the fuel tax, this is, I guess, the red line of no step back further, and upping their demands, just like in the Russian Revolution, where it's like, we want bread, and now beyond wanting bread, we want the Tsar's head. Similar thing here. It started as a fuel tax. Now they want Macron's head. As for the riots and the setting stuff on fire, I tend to think that this stuff is counterproductive. There's such thing as a moral high ground, and I do think from the standpoint of the public that high ground matters. If you're setting stuff on fire, then the attention is going to be on the fact that you're setting stuff on fire, not on the thing that you're protesting. The fact of the matter is, with protests this large, you would have still gotten a certain degree of attention, essentially, especially since you're bringing France to a halt. You can bring France to a halt without setting stuff on fire. I guess that's my point. Everything that I've read up to this point has said these were groups on the left and on the right. Right here. I'll show you what I'm looking at. Over the last few weeks, the Yellow Vest movement has morphed into a broad opposition to Macron, pro-business centrists elected in 2017. Violent anarchists and far-right groups have infiltrated it and thought to be behind Saturday's clash. Some representatives have also insisted on public talks on broadcast television. Some insisted on broadcast television. Some say we don't need to be on television. We can do it through social media. Depends on who you talk to. This is a large group, and they're not necessarily always on the same page. I guess it puts them in the mind of Occupy Wall Street to some degree, where they're forming a nucleus, but it's not quite there yet. We have said we won't change course because the course is good. Government spokesperson Benjamin Grievous told BFM television defiantly on Saturday morning, "It's been 30 years that people change course every 18 months, he added, referring to Macron's presidential predecessor, who have often caved to pressure on French street protests. Macron has so far refused to roll back taxes on fuel, which he sought needed to fund the country's transition to low-emission economy." You know what could have also funded it? Your billionaire friends. Essentially, the people who you're giving tax cuts to. Instead of giving those tax cuts, that money could have went towards your new energy economy. You can get the new energy economy without attacking the people at the bottom of an economic tax scale. These people are doing God's work. As he remains a fervent defender of the tax cuts he's delivered for the businesses and the wealthy, which he believes are necessary to lower the country's chronic high unemployment, opposition politicians condemn the violence, but also criticize the government response. Well, yeah, because it's politically good to do that at this point, seeing as the overwhelming majority of the public backs the yellow jackets. The government is not entitled to a third Black Saturday, said President Gerard Larcher, amid warnings that the protests could resume next week. Well, they said they are, so I assume they are. The government, far right and far left leaders, Marie Le Pen and Jean-Luc Mélenchon, called Sunday for new parliamentary elections. I bet they would do that. Despite the violence, opinion polls suggest that the protesters still attract 2/3 of the French people, the support of 2/3. I don't know if they're going to keep that number if this violence continues, but I mean, you talk about a protest. They do it up in Paris. Vive la France. Vive la France. God, this video has gone long. I'm sorry, guys. I tried to do this faster. Yeah, they can't take anymore. They're at the bottom of their at the bottom of their what they can do. Wesley Walker, what's happening to Wesley Walker? Darren Levy, they want Macron, the president for the rich, gone, and they're fed up with the whole system. Yes, only Mélenchon can provide policies that would help them. I don't follow French politics as much because I can't necessarily speak French. The European Union, yes. London, yes. And there are times where stories pop up from other countries that are in Europe that I follow. Vive la France. Like, part of me is proud that they're doing this. Part of me has a certain degree of, fucking A, that they're doing this. I gotta be honest. The things that the left pushed for in the country, that the overwhelming majority of the population wants in the United States, you are not. I am skeptical that you're going to get that through a political system and the way that the political system is arranged without public mass support. When Occupy Wall Street sprung up, that was the time. Like, sometimes you hear Democrats, or people make the argument that you need to push the government into action. That was the push. That was the push. You had all of these people organizing all across the United States saying, we're fed up with the way that this has been organized. You're giving 95% of our labor and our worth to the top 1%. We're sick of it. And it springs up all across the United States, not just the United States, all across the world. Now, these are lefties. And because they're lefties, they're like herding cats. And so they want to have this kind of decentralized structure. Nonsense. This is a military campaign where you're trying to siege the government that's currently in office in order to get the things that you want across the finish line. None of this lefty, non-hierarchical nonsense. You're going into an organized body where you try to go after your objectives. Fizzled out. Does this fizzle out? God, I hope not. God, I hope not. But that said, good job, France. Good job, France. The French have protests as part of their culture. Yes, they do. French Revolution, yeah. I wish Americans were as brave as the French people. I do too. But I'm wondering if this has to do with the amelioration of the working class, meaning the level that the people have gotten what they consider to be normal. Like, this is our normal level of existence. And we are now living below what we in our heads consider to be the normal level of existence. And in living below that level, it incentivizes a certain degree of we're at our wits' end. We can't afford to live in the way that we're living. We need to do something, in which case it compels action. I suspect that there is a line that even in America where you would have protests like this. Again, Occupy Wall Street was a righteous indignation of a country that just fizzled out. This is, it's fucking amazing. It's fucking amazing. The French have brass balls for fighting back. Yes, they do. Here are many political similarities that might help you understand, Jamal. Melchior equals Jeremy Corbyn. Le Pen, yeah, Le Pen. I know Le Pen. That one I do know. Macron equals Blair. Yeah, and I know Macron. I followed him. That I have followed. I followed Macron. I followed Le Pen. Melencon. Him I didn't know. Neo-conservatives have made everyone in America scared to fight authority. Well, I mean, if that was true, there wouldn't have been any Occupy Wall Street. I mean, the fact that Occupy Wall Street exists shows that it's there. It's there. The fact that Trump gets elected showed that that righteous anger is there. It just needs to be sparked. In this case, it was sparked by a fuel tax. Fucking A, man. Fucking A. You want Medicare for all? You want your Green New Deal? Right there. Right there. Not saying set shit on fire, but fucking A, set shit on fire. And I mean that in the political sense. And I mean that in a protest sense, not in a riot sense. Meaning, the political system, the way it is, has seized up. I'm going to take Chris Hedges' word on this. And in seizing up, these guys take cash and do favors for the cash. If there is no incentive for them to not do that, then there is no incentive for them to not do that. You have dollars or you have pitchforks. Right now, you just have dollars. You have a very few number of people who are in the political space that are pushing for change on this stuff. But for the most part, it's business as usual. Ocasio-Cortez, for all of the stuff that she wanted to do and all the good she wanted to do, had to end up, based on political will or political force, choosing Nancy Pelosi to lead as Speaker of the House, even though Nancy Pelosi in no way is going to put through Medicare for all, is trying to put through legislation that kneecap any ability to push that over the finish line. If you want her to be effective, if you want those people who are pushing to be effective, something like this gives them power. It gives them political will. It allows them to make that argument that much more stridently, that much more strongly. Occupy Wall Street was a fucking missed opportunity in so many ways. And God, I hope that opportunity is not missed in France. Good job, France. Good job, France. Viva la France. Viva la France. All right, I'll end this here. Sorry this one took so long. I thought I could go through this faster. But I just wanted to read the stories and I wanted to show some of the stories because I wanted you to see some of the scenes that was taking place, and I wanted to give you a fuller view of what was going on in France and why it was going on in France, and I wanted you to hear from them themselves. So, as always, my links are always at the bottom. See it for yourself. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support through Patreon. Anti-war. It's all under the Green New Deal. No, it's not. I give you fair warning. And this is coming from somebody who is decidedly on the left. I give you fair warning. The tip of the spear cannot be the Green New Deal. Agreed. Your planet is on fire. Agreed. The UN warnings that are being made. I am sitting in Czech Republic. There's right now, I think it's in Kados. The UN is holding a conference trying to get the Paris deal ratified. The Paris deal is not enough. It doesn't go far enough at all. All of this stuff, you're already fucked. It's already baked into the cake unless you're talking about a revolutionary change in the way we go about our energy production and in the way we go about our monetary system. I mean, for fuck's sake, the stuff that's in this computer is going to go dead within the course of a year or so. The items that they put into this computer had to be mined, had to be milled, all that stuff. There had to be all this labor that went into creating this computer. And ultimately, at the end of it, they make it so it dies soon. So, because if this computer lasted for 15 years, they'd run out of business. It's a business model. It's not just this computer. It's all sorts of stuff, appliances. They make that stuff so it doesn't necessarily last beyond a certain time, because if it doesn't last for a particular time, they run out of business. They have to keep making those items, and you need to keep buying those items. Now, I say that to say this. That's extraordinarily wasteful. I mean, we're throwing stuff away, either in landfills or in some other thing where it's going into trash, and all of the energy and labor and work that it took to get that stuff and to make that stuff is essentially going to waste. But our entire system is this way. We're essentially on a hamster wheel where companies have to continuously produce a particular product, and you need to continuously buy that product. And I'm not talking about like orange juice. I'm talking about actual physical products. Beyond that point, if you're going into things like animal agriculture, where you're talking about meat, most people always talk about oil and gas, missing the point of animal agriculture being 50% of the problem on this stuff. I guess I'm making a point. Oftentimes, they try to put this on individuals. The issue here is not individuals. The issue here is 70% of this stuff is coming from companies. These are externalized costs. Those externalized costs are put on you. When you're in a particular area and you get lung cancer, and that lung cancer comes because some company is putting some shit in the air, or your kid gets cancer because they're putting that shit in the water, you have to pay those medical bills. The company doesn't pay that medical bill. The UN is saying that the world is coming to an end. The world is at stake. They're talking about catastrophic climate change. But, and I mean, you need a revolutionary change for this. But, if my kid needs to eat, I don't care. If, if I need to get medication that I can't afford, I don't care. My initial and immediate concerns are going to override this idea of this amorphous thing that's taking place outside of me, the thing that's in front of me. Stop the pain. People are always going to try to stop the pain first. If that's needed to eat, need a prescription, need to pay for their house, need to pay for their car, whatever it is, the immediate concerns are going to come first. If those people are insecure and vulnerable, they're not going to care about the environmental stuff. There are very few people are going to say, fuck, I can't pay my house note. Fuck, I can't afford this kid. But hey, I really need to get onto environmental concerns. I'm in abject poverty, popping pills because I can't deal with fucking reality. But we need to deal with climate change. Nobody is going to say that. The tip of the spear, you can do your Green New Deal. You can do that, providing you deal with the economic realities of individuals that are in the country and making sure that those people are secure as you go about their Green New Deal. If their head is above water, they will support you on this. If their head is not above water, they will not. Hashtag Green New Deal, yes. Yes. But again, I give you fair warning. That cannot be the tip of the spear. The number one concern that people had was Medicare for all. That was because it was made an issue. But it's not just because it was made an issue. It wasn't just because Bernie Sanders was talking about it. It wasn't just because the lefties was talking about it. It was also because it was a real concern. Healthcare bills under Obamacare are skyrocketing. Yes, they would have been higher without Obamacare, but let's be honest that those things are skyrocketing. Even before Trump was elected, in some places they went up by 50%. Yes, you can make an argument that Republicans were fucking around in order to, do that, but your legislation was weak enough that allowed them to do it. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. It was a big deal because it concerned them as individuals. A Green New Deal would not have had that resonance. It only has resonance among lefties. You can get the public on board for the Green New Deal stuff, but I guarantee you have to deal with their economic realities, and they'll let you deal with the Green New Deal. Meaning, if you make sure that people are okay, then they will be okay with you carrying out your issue with the Green New Deal. That's the deal. You can't do one, you have to do both. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. French didn't need Bitcoin or Singularity or libertarians to fight the government. USA is a joke. Yeah, they didn't need those things. They just put themselves out in the public sphere and screamed at the top of their lungs for as loud as they could possibly scream. All right, I will end this here. Vive la France. Vive la France. Keep it up. Started as a fuel tax. It's morphed into Macron's head. In a political sense, but Macron's head. Vive la France. Anti-war, I think Jamarl is confusing the new mantra for the Green New Deal. Explain, what do you mean in confusing the mantra for the Green New Deal? What am I wrong? What did I say that was wrong, Solax? I have disagreement. Depending on the people, if there's honest disagreement, I like it. You're speaking from your heart, not from the facts. The Green New Deal covers healthcare, wage, energy, education, etc., etc. Okay, fair enough. I'm just saying, if you're telling people that you're pushing for a Green New Deal, they're going to hear that as an environmental thing, not necessarily as a thing dealing with healthcare. If you are making an argument for Medicare for all, that is looked at as healthcare. There's a difference in those things. Even if it's a political difference, there is a difference in those things. Certainly you agree with me on that. At least, maybe you don't. Auntie Colin. Auntie War Colin. Colin. Let's see. Find a number. I want to make your argument. What is it? What is it? Jesus Christ. I can never find that number when I need that number. Here we are. That's if you want to. I mean, I am just saying your language matters. And calling it a Green New Deal, even though I agree with the need for a Green New Deal, I think you're going to lose people if that's your tip of the spear. Medicare for all. Everybody knows what Medicare is. Call in, Auntie. Wesley Walker says, debates. Please watch the video. What video? You know, they're not going to show a link to the video. But send me an email. I feel you. I think this is a lefty thing where lefties, you know, feel this Green New Deal and all this other stuff. But the language is not. I would prefer, if it was me, that Medicare for all became the tip of the spear. And in Medicare for all becoming the tip of the spear, once you're getting in power, then implement a Green New Deal and talk about the Green New Deal. I think it's important. I think it's extremely important. So don't misunderstand me. But calling it green sounds like tree huggers. And it's the same problem with the Green Party. Same party with the Green Party. All right. I'll watch a video, but send me the video through my email. Medicare for all is in the Green New Deal. I know, Auntie, but I guess I'm making a point to you that calling it Green New Deal versus calling it Medicare for all, people don't watch the news. You understand that? Like, people only see bits and pieces. It's the amount that filters down to the individual level. It's minuscule. The language that you use matters. It matters dramatically so. All these reforms need to be done simultaneously. Yeah, I'm talking about optics. I gave a perfect example. Some people say, well, what's the problem with the Green Party? And I said, the problem with the Green Party is that they're named the Green Party. Now, the problems with the Green Party go beyond that, but part of the issue is people consider them the tree huggers. Now, in all honesty, the Green Party's platform is fucking phenomenal. And it goes well beyond just healthcare. I mean, it goes beyond just tree hugging. Yes, there's an environmental component to it, but there's also a healthcare component, and, you know, there's a platform for all sorts of stuff. Healthcare, energy, the works. But hearing green, people think tree huggers. Just saying. I honestly don't see a solution to climate change without war. If you're truly looking to keep the asteroid from hitting the planet, there will be countries not interested in continue exploiting. You're saying that some countries will have to be destroyed in order to prevent them from ending the world. Look, many of the countries around the world has agreed to it. And the biggest polluters, I mean, for the most part, you just need the biggest polluters. You need the oil production. Call it sustainable living standard. Or human rights movement. What about human rights movement? Like, that makes more sense from a standpoint of a Green New Deal. All of those things fall under sustainability and all. Yeah, a human rights movement, something that makes sense, that gets across that you're talking about the individual and you're helping the individual. The Green New Deal comes across as if you're just trying to protect trees. I agree with the tree hugger thing. I agree with the Green New Deal. Ah, here we are. All right, Auntie, I'll watch this. I hope you know, though, you had me at hello on this. I think our disagreement has to do more with the optics than with the reality of the stuff that's in it. FDR's extended basic human rights, human dignity, yes. That's my profession, Edward, but still I lean towards Jamarl argument. Oh, I got somebody on my side. Thank you. Eat the rich movement. Oh, I love that. I love that. Yes, they're disrupting our ability to communicate by watering down our language and confusing people on definitions. You're saying you like the policies, but have issues with the marketing and the policies to sell to broad base of voters. Yes. Yeah. I'm saying, let me be very clear. I'm for this idea of a Green New Deal. If what people mean by the Green New Deal is this kind of new sustainable living where you're deprioritizing or you're trying to become carbon neutral in a very short period of time and you're changing over the way we do our energy production, then yes, I agree fundamentally with that. Now, if you're saying this also includes healthcare and this other stuff, fair enough. I don't know, it's if you're putting all of that stuff under one umbrella, fair enough. But you have to market it. And you have to explain it to people in a way that people will understand it. And I am telling you, the Green Party's issue has to do with part and parcel that they're called the Green Party. It sounds like tree hugging. The Green New Deal, if it doesn't attend to people's needs. Now, to some degree, this does attend to people's needs. If you're talking about changing over the economic system, you're talking about infrastructure and all this other stuff, you're talking about building. So you are talking about those things. The language gets skewed, though, when you're talking about the Green New Deal includes healthcare. Like, then what's Medicare for all? All right, Auntie Ware, I'll watch the video. Because I think you think I'm talking on my ass. I don't think I am. I am making an argument not on the substance of what you're saying, but on the articulation of what you're saying. There's a difference in those things. Green needs rebranding. That's my point. Need to make green mean economics and jobs and money. Yes. People consider economics and jobs personal to them. People consider green environmental stuff. I'm not arguing with... I'm going to watch this video game and I'm probably going to agree with from second one to second whatever. We're talking about optics. Green can also refer to money. They can emphasize that the socialism will put more money into people's pockets. You're right about the issues. This is a possible world solution. Yeah, I would. Yeah, like I said, Auntie, you had me at hello. You had me at hello. What kind of scientist is Jeremy Corbyn's brother? I don't know. I didn't know Jeremy Corbyn's brother was a scientist. All right. I'm going to end this. This has gone 48 minutes. Jesus fucking Christ. All right. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. Creative experiments. I like the fact that the word green disturbs people, kind of tells you to state how bad we are. It's not that it disturbs people. It's just that they have other interests. That's all. There's no disruption to the individual. The individual just doesn't care. Like, they care in this kind of ephemeral sense of, yes, we need to do something about the environment, but fuck, I need my needs met first. If you can do both simultaneously, and not just that, if you meet their needs, they're going to be less concerned about you doing the Green New Deal, because it's not that they're against you doing green stuff. It's just that they want their needs met first. People need to have a certain degree of safety and comfort and being less vulnerable before allowing you to go to that stuff. So yeah. All right. You all have a good one, and I may have another one after this, but we'll see. Thanks all. You have a good night.